All right, so this is the second topic of section 2, Khilafat movement. The timeline that we're going to be studying now is from 1920 onwards to 1924. Let's look at a background of the recent events that took place before 1920. After 1905, the Partition of Bengal, Consolidation of Muslim League, the Lucknow Pact, the Montlamentary reforms, Montfort reforms. So all of these are the important events that took place right after the you could say the War of Independence, and the era of Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khan and all of the religious reformers. I mean, this is exactly when the British started ruling in India. When the Mughal Empire was, I mean, it came to its proper official end. British had a very strong, firm control over the politics of the subcontinent. Now, in 1920, due to certain reasons, there was again a clash between the British, the Muslims, the Hindus, and obviously internal clashes between Muslims and Hindus as well. Khilafat movement is basically a movement formed on on different reasons. Muslims had their own reasons for the formation of this movement. Hindus had their own reasons for joining Muslims in this movement. So primarily, this movement was initiated by the Muslims, and obviously there were certain reasons for that. So we're going to study all of these important events that took place during 1920, 1924, the causes, the consequences, the reasons for the success and failure of this movement separately. Okay, so Hijrat movement was the first important event that took place between this time period of 4 years. So I mean, this is also one reason as to why the Khilafat movement was formed. So what happened was, in India at that time, because we see British had this firm control over these major provinces, Muslim ulamas, they felt that India was a place of war, basically, and it was not. I mean, and such place in Arabic is known as Darul Harb. So for them, I mean, they thought that it's important for the Muslims to migrate to another country, and they cannot practice religion peacefully in such an area where war takes place constantly. I mean, keeping in view the conflicts between the Indians and the British in the War of Independence of 1850s and later on. I mean, even after the War of Independence, if you've studied the previous all these events of 1900s, 1905, 1906, the formation of Muslim League, the Lucknow Pact, British were trying to again and again introduce certain reforms. For example, the Montlamentary reforms. They were trying to bring in different, you could say, policies to govern the subcontinent. They were trying to settle in the conditions of the subcontinent, but Muslims, the Hindus, the Indians altogether, they were constantly demanding more reforms, which is why it became a place of war. There was no settlement for years. I mean, there were differences in the ideologies, there were differences in the opinions and the perspectives of the Indians of the British. So this is why the Muslims in India, the Muslim ulamas in India, declared India as Darul Harb, a place of war, and they wanted the Muslims to migrate to Afghanistan. So what happened was, as a result of this call, 20,000 Muslims, they migrated to Afghanistan. Okay, so now 20,000 was a huge number. They were expecting that Afghanistan, the Muslims of Afghanistan would welcome them because obviously their fellow Muslims needed help. But turned out that the Afghan government rejected their entry and they didn't allow the Muslims to enter their country. Okay, so now this migration was a major step because the Muslims of India, they had left everything in their, I mean, in India, their properties, their houses, their belongings, their everything. I mean, they didn't have anything when they migrated. So when they had to face this rejection from the Afghan government, they consequently faced severe economic and social miseries, just because they had nothing to rely upon now. They had no property, they had no belonging. So yeah, I mean, because they were considering that this migration was a one-way thing and there was no going back for them, but no one expected this result. So this Hijrat movement turned out to be a disaster for the Indian Muslims at that time. Guys, is this clear, the Hijrat movement? Ahmed, Habiba, any questions?
No, sir, fine.
And what about you, Habiba?
No, it's clear.
It's clear. All right. Okay, so the next important event was the non. Okay, so Habiba, I'm sharing these questions here with you on the screen because this is how you'll be asked in the exams. The 4 mark questions, the seven. I mean, you must be aware of these question patterns, the 4, 7, 14 mark questions. So this is why I am sharing this resource with you, so you can understand these concepts through these questions, because this is how at the end of the day you'll be asked to write upon these problems here. Okay, so guys, the next point was the non-corporation movement. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know why is this board stuck. I need to, I'll share it again, just a second. All right. So guys, can you see the screen now? I hope the screen is visible. Yeah, okay. All right, so the non-corporation movement now. So non-corporation movement was started in 1920 by Gandhi. So civil disobedience movement, which, okay, this was a reaction against the Montfort reforms. We've studied Montfort reforms in the previous lectures. So in 1919, British tried to introduce the set of reforms known as the Montfort reforms, and the developments that took place were they introduced diarchy system in India. Diarchy was a system in which they gave certain subjects under direct Indian control and certain subjects were kept under direct British control. For example, education, health, forestry. All of these departments were directly under the control of Indians. So this was an attempt to give Indians a greater say in the government, because all this time you must have studied during the War of Independence, since the British started annexing Bengal, Sindh, these provinces, Indians felt as if they were not given this basic right of democracy. They were not given enough political power, political say. So now this 1919's Montfort reforms, it was sort of you could say an attempt of British to include Indians in the government. So they gave them this Ministry of Education, Health, Forestry, Public Works, just so they could manage these ministries according to their own policies. However, British took control of certain other subjects, for example, foreign exchange, defense. All of these important ministries were under British control. So Indians over here felt that their basic right of political power was still not given to them. And this was just a showcase of power. What the British were trying to do here through Montfort reforms was just a showcase of power, but in reality, that power was still with the British and it was not given to the Indians. So Gandhi, in 1920, a year after the introduction of Montfort reforms, started this non-cooperation movement, which was a civil disobedience act. They burned the British clothes. They even tried to, you could say, assassinate a few of the Indian British viceroys as well. So this ban on British goods, ban on British products in the Indian markets was obviously a blow to the economy, because all of this concept of East India Company was based on this entire thing: the trade, the import of British products in India, and the export of a very little export of the Indian products in the British market. So uh, the Indians that directly attacked on the British economy here. As a result, British, they started to imprison the Indians, and yeah, and obviously as a result of those imprisonments, violence further grew in India, because this incident, the Chauri Chaura incident, took place right after the non-cooperation movement. What this incident was, that several policemen were they were burned, and obviously Indians were doing all that. Gandhi saw that this movement had caused so much violence that as a result he had to discontinue the civil disobedience movement. All right. So this was the non-cooperation movement. In a 4 mark question, you're just supposed to write 4 points. So, I mean, you can pick up any 4 points and you can write about those in this answer. It's always good to mention important dates, important places. You should answer how and why the events happened. All right. Okay. Another important event that took place was in, let's just erase all of this, was the Arya Samaj movement. Okay, so this Arya Samaj movement was basically a self-rule movement, a movement that promoted nationalism. All right, you could also name it as a movement of nationalism here. So it was founded by the Ananda Sarvasti and in Mumbai, India, and the purpose of this movement was to promote the sentiments of nationalism, promote Hinduism, the Hindu practices in India, and it became a very aggressive movement by 1924 because they had, I mean, they started these severe conversions to Hinduism. They started promoting the Hindu practice in some continent, and because of this, the Hindu-Muslim relations were strained again because Muslims, they were working for the protection of the Islamic interests since day one. I mean, this was also one of the reasons why the Muslim League was formed. They wanted to protect the Muslim interests. During the partition of Bengal, Muslims really appreciated that step of the British when the Bengal was partitioned, and Muslims were given this majority. Why? Because they were trying to protect the religion, their culture. Even Sir Syed Ahmed Khan had worked for Urdu. The religious reformers like Shah Waliullah, Sayyid Ahmed Barelvi, Hajratullah had always worked for the preservation of Islam, purification of Islam. So now at this time, movements like Arya Samaj were obviously a threat to the Islamic culture, Islamic religion here. And this is one of the reasons to why the Muslim-Hindu relations were strained. All right. Any questions so far? Anything that's not clear?
I know it's clear.
It's clear. Okay. All right, let's move on now. Okay, so this question, okay, we're going to be leaving this question for now because we'll be coming to the personalities later. Okay, now the actual events of the Khilafat movement. Let's look at a few reasons as to why the Khilafat movement was formed here. This is a 14-mark question. So 14-mark questions because you write 7 points for this. So we're going to study the 7 reasons for the formation of Khilafat movement through this question. So the first reason as to why the Khilafat movement was formed was the protection of caliphate. If you look at the first paragraph here, so the Khalifa, the Caliph of Turkey, was one of the most important positions of leadership in the Islamic world. And Muslims had to protect the Caliph because British were trying to remove the Caliph after World War I. And Muslims, they wanted to protect the Khalifa. This is why they formed this Khilafat movement. This is the reason, this is the prime reason as to why they launched this movement against the British, because they wanted to protect their caliph. Let's read this paragraph as well. The most important reason for the formation of Khilafat movement was the fear in the Muslims of dismembering of the Khilafat in Turkey. The Khilafat held great importance for the Muslims and the Islamic world. The Muslims feared that if in World War I, Turkey faced defeat, the Khilafat might be dismembered. Therefore, they formed the Khilafat movement to save the seat of the Caliphate from being humiliated and dismembered by the British. So World War I, because Turkey was defeated, the allies of Turkey and Turkey were defeated in World War I. The British, on the other hand, they were trying to abolish the system of Khilafat, and obviously they were also abolishing the seat of the Caliph. So to protect this Khilafat, to protect the seat of the Caliph, Muslims had launched this movement. Another reason, okay, the second reason for the launch of Khilafat movement was the protection of holy places. I would recommend you guys to please keep taking notes. You can just write 1 point. I mean, the first reason you can write the protection of Caliph or the protection of Khilafat, and you can just now write the second point. Just keep writing points because that is going to help you later on when you'll be attempting these answers. Protection of holy places. So guys, the second point was, sorry, wait a second. Guys, can you, okay, sorry, the screen sharing not off. Can you see the screen now? I think it will be visible in a few seconds. Okay, I guess you can see the screen now. So, protection of holy places. Let's read this point here. As the British had severely threatened to take control over the religious areas of the Ottoman Empire, it left the Muslims worried as they did not want their holy places to be insulted and did not want the end of Islam. So, they founded the Khilafat movement to defend their holy places from being uh, desecrated. Guys, so by holy places, you can, I mean, we're talking about Makkah, Medina, these sacred places of Islam. And the British, they had, I mean, threatened to turn these places into some other public places, maybe. This is why, I mean, because of the immense importance of these holy places in Makkah and Medina, it was important for the Muslims to protect these places. And by abolishment of the Khilafat, by the changes that the British were about to make to the Ottoman Empire, it meant that there was a threat to these religious spaces as well. And this is why um, they formed this Khilafat movement. Third reason for the formation of Khilafat movement was the broken promises. The British had promised Muslims certain things before World War One, and the Muslims felt betrayed as the British didn't keep their promises after World War One. So let's look at this reason here. British knew that Muslims in India would not fight against their own brothers in Turkey or overthrow the Caliph. The British assured the Muslims and promised them that the Khalifa would be respected and would not be removed. But later on, when World War ended, the British started to decide to split Turkey. This created resentment among Muslims, who then formed the Khilafat movement to remind British of their promises. So, guys, just an overview. When World War One was about to take place, British obviously needed more people in their army. So they started these recruitments in India. They tried to attract the Indian soldiers to take part in the British army and fight against their enemies in World War One. And obviously, the British also tried to exploit the position of the Indian Muslims. They promised them huge sums of money and jewelry and all of these important stuff that the Muslims needed at that time. The Indians generally, the Hindus and the Muslims, because their financial conditions weren't really good. They weren't, most of the people in the subcontinent didn't belong to these well-off families. So they wanted, I mean, obviously British, because they promised wealth in return of these, I mean, Indians getting recruited in the British army. This is what the Indians did. And British also promised that if the Indians would take place in the war, in the World War One, they would not abolish their caliph in under any circumstances, even if the Turkey loses or the Ottoman Empire, all of the allies of Turkey, they lose the World War One. But as a result, when the war was over, the British, they started to back off on their promises. They tried to remove the caliph. They tried to disrespect the holy places. This is one of the reasons as to why the Khilafat movement was formed, as the Muslims wanted to remind the British of the promises that were made to them, to the Muslims, before the World War One. All right. Another reason for the formation of Khilafat movement was the splitting of Ottoman Empire. So in World War One, Turkey was against Britain. Turkey was very important for Muslims as it spread over most of the areas of Muslim world. It became clear that Turkey would be split as Germany and Austria had also been defeated and dismembered. So Muslims founded the Khilafat movement to prevent the splitting of Ottoman Empire. So we're talking about all these allies of Turkey, the Germany, Austria, Turkey. They were on one side, British were on the other side with France and all of the other countries. So what happened was, if you remember, if you've studied the world history, guys, do you know about the Treaty of Versailles that took place in France? Any idea about the treaty when Germany and Austria were split up? Hmm? No? Okay. So this Treaty of Versailles took place right after World War One. All right. It was signed in France. Versailles is a city in France. It was signed over there, and the British, they were representatives from the British government, the French government. And what they did was, as a punishment for these opponent allies, Germany, Austria, what they did was they tried to take control of some of the lands. If you look at the map, you can even Google it right now. Treaty of Versailles, you can Google the map of Austria and Germany before World War One and their maps after World War One. You're going to see a clear difference. Some of their territories were broken and were taken under the British control and the French control. Why? Because this was some sort of a punishment for these opponents, because they fought against the British, the French in the World War I, right? So now the people of the Ottoman Empire, they feared that if the similar, I mean, if they could do this to Austria and Germany, they might even do this to Turkey, right? So Muslims, because Turkey, the Ottoman Empire held such an immense importance to the Muslims because most of the Muslim land was the Ottoman Empire, so they feared this dismembering of the Ottoman Empire here. This is one of the reasons. This was another reason as to why they formed this Khilafat movement, because they wanted to protect the Ottoman Empire. They wanted to protect this empire from these severe consequences that Germany and Austria had to face after World War I. Okay, is this now clear? This is exactly what happened. All right.
Yes, clear.
All right. Now, okay. Next point. So, okay, another reason as to why the Khilafat movement was formed was that the Muslim soldiers, leaders were imprisoned. Okay, most of the Muslim leaders were imprisoned, so there was no one to guide them against these for this movement. Muslim soldiers had joined the British to fight World War. However, many of them withdrew from the war when the turn came to fight Turkey. Seeing this, the British started arresting. Okay, so see how Muslims had initially, I mean, they got recruited in the British Army, but when the War of Independence, I mean, okay, sorry, not the War of Independence, when the World War I was solely against the Turkey, Muslims, it was not accepted for the Muslims to fight against Turkey, because Turkey was a Muslim country. It was a Muslim country. It was a part of Ottoman Empire at that time, and it was unacceptable for the Muslims to fight against the Muslim brothers. So this was one reason as to why Muslims started withdrawing from the British Army. And when British saw this, obviously it was again hurting the number of British Army at that time, and they were in the middle of World War I. So what they did was British started imprisoning Muslim leaders such as Maulana Muhammad Ali Johar and Maulana Shaukat Ali Johar. They're known as the Ali brothers. They got imprisoned because this was how the British were reacting to the withdrawals of Muslims. Muslims never wanted to fight against Turkey. They were just there to support British because British had promised so many things in return for this loyalty. Yeah. So upon these imprisonments, Muslims, obviously they wanted to get their leaders free again. This became another reason for the launch of Khilafat movement. Among all of the other reasons, the protection of Ottoman Empire, protection of Khilafat, protection of holy places, this is also another reason because they wanted the leaders to be free. They wanted to protect the leaders who were actually there, who were guiding the Muslims of the subcontinent, because obviously there was this crisis in the British India as well, the Indo-Pak subcontinent. Yeah, Muslims, in Hindus, they were in a constant war, a constant conflict with the British. Yeah, and the imprisonment of leaders was a severe blow to the future Pakistan movement, the nationalism movements that were taking place in the subcontinent at that time. All right. And the last point was the Indian resentment. Some of the Indian reforms, for example, the Montfort reforms, the Rowlatt Act, the Amritsar massacre. We've studied the Amritsar massacre in the previous lectures in 1920. Habib, I'm just giving this short highlight, an overview for you. Amritsar massacre was basically an event when, after the introduction of Montfort reforms in 1919, British had limited these public gatherings because the Indians were starting to realize that the British were just trying to suppress their voices. They were trying to, I mean, Indians were trying to oppose the British rule. So in return, the British, they tried to limit the Indian gatherings. They put this ban on press, on public gatherings. They were just trying to limit these opposition activities. And as a result, because the Muslims, the Hindus, the Indians, they felt further threatened. They felt as if their democratic right was taken from them. They got together in this Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar in 1920 to basically showcase their resentment, showcase the disappointment that they had against the British government. That was a peaceful protest. And the British, under the leadership of General Dyer, they open fired over there and they killed almost 1,600 children, women, all of the people who were there for a peaceful protest. And several thousands of the people were also injured. So this Amritsar massacre was a severe blow to the nationalism movements, and this is one of the reasons as to why the Indians, they wanted to show the resentment, and right after that event, they formed this Khilafat movement. Hindus also joined the Muslims for this movement because they felt as if, in this point particularly, Hindus and the Muslims were together and they on a common platform, and they had similar reasons to show resentment against British. All right. So guys, this is all. These are all the reasons for the formation of Khilafat movement. You can write these reasons down separately. The notes are there on the drive. Habiba, for you, the notes I can share this PDF in the group, or I can send you the link to the Google Drive as well. Okay. Uh, Once you attempt these questions, you can definitely take help from these notes as well. So guys, we've studied the reasons for the formation of Khilafat movement. I'm gonna just give an overview of all the reasons. Number one, protection of caliphate. Number two, protection of holy places. Number three, Muslims want to remind the British of their broken promises. Number four, they wanted to prevent the splitting of Ottoman Empire. Number five, protection of Turkey from these policies, the British policies. Number six, arrest of Muslim leaders. Number seven, the Indian resentment. These are the 7 reasons for the formation of Khilafat movement. And this obviously is an answer to the 14-mark question, where you're asked to write 7 points for a particular question. Any questions now? Any questions from these reasons? Anything that's not clear? Yes, there will be a closing paragraph that is known as the evaluation. Once you write these reasons here, you will have to write a paragraph for your own evaluation. You can agree or disagree with certain reasons. You'll tell which reason was the most important. For example, if you look at this question here, the question says, the fear of dismembering of Khilafat was the most important cause of the foundation of Khilafat movement. Do you agree? So now, because they've mentioned this point, the abolishment of Khilafat in the question here, you will be writing about this point in the beginning. Your first introductory paragraph will be about this reason here, okay? This the abolishment of Khilafat. Once you write this, this is basically your level 3, okay? After level 3, you're going to move on to the next level, that is level 4, and you'll write 6 other reasons on that level. All the other 6 reasons that we've studied here. And then once you write all of these 7 reasons, 1 reason for level 3 and 6 reasons for level 4, the last level 5 is the closing paragraph, that is the evaluation, and you'll clearly state whether you agree that the abolishment of Khilafat was the main reason, or was there any other important reason for the foundation of Khilafat movement. Okay, you sort of present your judgment in the concluding paragraph, in the evaluation. So I just want to have a discussion here. What do you guys think? We've studied these 7 reasons. Do you think this abolishment of Khilafat was the main reason? What do you say?
Yeah, I think it was the most important reason.
And how would you justify that?
Because the Khilafat, it was in Turkey at the time. It was like the like the leader of the Muslims.
Yeah.
And then if there was no Khilafat, then there would be nobody to unite all of the Muslims.
All right.
So
okay, that's fair. So this is how you're going to write. I mean, this is what you'll write in the evaluatory paragraph, right? And then you'll say, okay, I agree that abolishment of Khilafat was the most important reason because, yeah, all the justifications that you've just presented. Habiba, what do you think? Was the abolishment of Khilafat the most important reason, or was there any other important reason as well?
I think the religious areas was also important.
The protection of holy places. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if you write an evaluation, you'd have to just agree with one reason. So, would you go with that, the protection of holy places?
Yeah.
And how would you justify that?
Because it was something that's important to them, and it would
Uh,
end Islam,
okay, yes, you can talk
which
about that.
was important for the Muslims.
Hmm. I mean, it was hurting the Islamic sentiment the most, right? And Muslims feared that if, let's say, because these holy places are symbolic to the Islamic culture, the Islamic identity, the abolishment of these places, a threat to these places meant a threat directly to the religion. This is how you can write the evaluation. So this is, it's completely up to you, all right, guys, to agree with a certain reason, but you have to present a valid justification. There's no right or wrong answer here. I mean, if you justify your point well, your answer will obviously be correct, because you need to justify to the examiner that whatever you're writing is actually true, is actually the valid reason. All right. Uh, the most straightforward trick is that you agree with whatever is written in the question. For example, if the writing the abolishment of Khilafat was the most important reason, in the evaluation, just go with that. Just tell them, yes, this was the most important reason, and present a few reasons. This is the most safest way to play, all right? Most of the students, they ask us, okay, how should we secure this evaluation? Because at times, I mean, this is because it's completely open-ended. You're not sure what the correct answer is. So what I recommend to the students is that just go with whatever is written in the question. This is how you're going to be the safest. But yes, if you think there is any other thing that's more important than what's written in the question, go with that if you have a valid justification for that. And a valid justification is the one which has examples, which has proper reasons, analysis. All right. And analysis is very important at each step as well. Whatever reason you write, if you notice, all of the points over here that are written in bold after every paragraph, these are the analysis. Analysis is sort of an overview of the entire reason that you write. And this is how you connect your reason to the question. For example, we're talking about the formation of Khilafat movement here. If you focus on this first reason, the first paragraph here, the analysis over here says that therefore they formed the Khilafat movement to save the seat of Caliphate from being humiliated and dismembered by the British. So now this, even if you forget the entire reason here and you just focus on these few lines, they answer the exact question. That was it the most important cause for the formation of Khilafat movement? And if you just read these three lines, that they want to protect the seat of Caliphate from getting humiliated and dismembered, this is why they formed the movement. So analysis is sort of a, a link between the question and your answer. The justifications that you write in an answer, the explanations that you write for a particular reason, you have to analyze those reasons as well. And this is how you do it. You just present sort of a summary in 2 to 3 lines, and that exactly answers the question. Then if you look at the second reason here, the protection of holy places, they founded the Khilafat movement to defend their holy places from being uh, desecrated. So now again, this just answers exactly what the question demands here. So analysis at every single step is very important. For every reason, you state, you explain, and you analyze. And then at the end, once you're done writing all of these 7 reasons, you evaluate as well.